for all those we don't know about. We can't forget about that, because, you know, we exist as the pebble in the pond, you know, radiating out compassion, the energy of love and acceptance. And we want it to touch everyone, not just our community, but radiating out farther and farther. And there are those who can't speak, who just don't know that they can. And that's for them. And so it is. I announce Reverend Jesse is coming up right now. Are we having a song before? No. Okay. Okay. The Heart of Compassion, is that correct?
That is correct.
The Heart of Compassion.
The Heart of Compassion.
Thank you.
Water.
Thank you for that kind introduction. It's very good to be with you again. It's great to be back. I'll add that my preferred pronouns are Jay and Jesse, and that I don't mind at all as you practice getting comfortable with that. And if you want to talk afterwards in the discussion time about pronouns and self-compassion, I would be happy to do that. It's getting a bit long, so I took it out. In preparing for today, I thought a lot about this month's theme of compassion, and how it relates to last month's theme of belonging. And today I want to focus on two different kinds of compassion: compassion for self and compassion for others. Those of you who are familiar with Brené Brown's work, anybody? Right. You'll probably notice that I've been heavily influenced by her work, in part because she has been so influential to so many of my colleagues and mentors and teachers that her ideas are literally the ocean in which I've been swimming for the last many years. And I just want to acknowledge that, because her work is, in a sense, the sacred text underlying many of my comments today. And as you know, Unitarian Universalists have many, many sacred texts, all the usual sacred texts, and poetry and science, silence, the work of Brené Brown, and many others. And they vary depending on who's speaking. After musing about these topics for several weeks, I've concluded that there are at least 4 elements to compassion. I'm going to start with self-compassion, because, as Brown points out, we can't practice compassion with other people if we can't treat ourselves kindly. So to belong is to be accepted for one's whole self, which means that in part it's on each of us to, as Jennifer Yoakum put it recently, continually expand our own authenticity. Does that sound familiar? Becoming ever more fully and brilliantly our own true selves. I love that. It's such a great way of explaining the process of getting honest with ourselves. And honesty is the first element of self-compassion. And becoming honest, this is the part she didn't point out, it takes some courage sometimes. And in 12-step programs that some of you are probably familiar with, it's related to the 4th step, making a searching and fearless moral inventory. Fearless. Okay, now I'm going to do it. It takes courage. It does. So what do we do when we look within, get honest with ourselves, and discover things that might be troubling? Well, we have some choices. One choice is we can pull the covers back over the stuff and try to simply fit in with what seems socially acceptable. If we limit ourselves to trying to fit in, however, to that exact extent, we compromise the possibility that we can ever truly belong, because fitting in, as Ruth Miller pointed out, is essentially adopting a persona, an untrue representation of ourselves that, continued over time, is exhausting. Fitting in is not the same thing as belonging. Okay, so let's say that we embark on this courageous, sometimes exhilarating, sometimes frightening process of getting honest with ourselves. It's quite possible that when we allow ourselves to know and feel, for example, just exactly how deeply worried or angry, maybe even rageful, maybe fearful, or maybe lonely, no matter how much of those there is, no matter the despair that we may sometimes feel, then to accept these things about ourselves, we must grapple with what Brené Brown writes so brilliantly about for decades now, shame. We have to deal with that most difficult of things, shame. Now, the dominant culture of the US is very, very good at telling us that we should be ashamed of ourselves, particularly when we're not fitting in. It offers no tools, however, other than strict conformity, to manage that or to alleviate that shame. This is exactly when the need for self-compassion becomes paramount. Self-compassion, Brené Brown writes, is key, because when we are able to be gentle with ourselves in the midst of shame, we are more likely to reach out, connect, and experience empathy. So this connectedness, this empathy, is related to compassion for others, which we'll get to in a moment. When we are able to be gentle with ourselves, she says, so kindness, gentleness, is the second element of self-compassion. And this kindness, this gentleness, requires, among other things, humility. Yeah, right? Well, humility is not a trait that's valued, let alone taught, by the dominant culture here in the US, although it is taught in many other cultures. Most indigenous cultures, for example, are pretty well tuned into that, as well as many other kinds of spiritual communities. This is not unusual at all, but in the US as a culture, it's not valued. In fact, it's somewhat sneered at. That's a problem, because humility is key. I'll have more to say about humility in a bit, but for the moment, let's just say that humility acknowledges that just as I must train ego to know that my strengths don't make me superior to anyone else, I must also train ego to understand that my weaknesses don't make me any less than others. So I've got to train my ego. Fundamentally, I'm no different than anybody else. I'm not so large or important that my failures distinguish me in any noticeable way from any other human. I'm just not that big a deal, all right? There's a kindness in that and a clarity in this sort of honest humility that can put a really solid floor under us in times of personal despair about our flaws, foibles, and failings, which all of us experience as huge, at least sometimes. So the third element of self-compassion is really an action. And it's exactly that act of training our ego. We have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally. We have to train it. That's an action. And it can be a long road. With the help of our new friend humility, however, we might develop a sense of humor about it, because seeing ourselves as essentially ridiculous in our ego-driven selves can do a lot to take the wind out of ego's sails. It's like, oh, there I go again. That's hilarious. Not, but yes. Learning to laugh at ourselves can be profoundly healing. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
So, honesty, kindness grounded in humility, and action are all elements of self-compassion. But I think there's one more thing, and I'll give you a personal example to illustrate it. As a writer, I've had a lifelong struggle with a lofty, sneering, and often vicious inner critic, a voice who continually points out that I am just a fool to think I can write something useful, that this is a ludicrous idea. Whatever I'm writing, it's been done before and much better many times by much more talented people than me. So just who do I think I am fooling by attempting to do this? I'm serious. This, and you know what I do in order to sort of get around this inner critic? I don't sleep. I purposefully sleep deprive myself as a mechanism to put that little inner critic, it's like the inner critic sleeping, oh boy, now I can go. And I do that. I get up early. I got 6 hours of sleep last night. That must be some kind of large record. Sometimes I come to you without having had any sleep at all, because that's how hard it was. But that's okay, because I like doing this, you see. I always learn something when I do these things. So, and that's a gift, and you're a gift. So I keep coming back. Let's see, where am I? Yes, the story. An experienced fellow creative on a group project many years ago once advised me to do this. Simply sit down with this voice and invite it to speak and listen. Really listen. Deep listening is a kindness, yes? And when the voice eventually runs out of things to say, she advised, invite it to take a beautiful walk, or a nice nap, or have a cup of tea. You know, just chill for a while. Like, go away, and you can come back later. So, boundaries, okay? The fourth element of self-compassion, boundaries, at least in this example. Kindly, but firmly, after having listened deeply and understanding, I invite that critic to take a break by doing something kind for themselves. So I'm claiming that self-compassion involves all four of these things. Honesty, kindness grounded in humility, actions, and boundaries. Well, okay, so that's one thing. How does it play out when we consider compassion for others? Well, first, bringing our authentic self, yay, to the interaction is important. Because if we don't want to be there doing that, this will be obvious and it will be the opposite of compassionate, so don't do that. Checking in with ourselves is going to be important. Honesty is a really good starting place if you are interested in practicing compassion with somebody. Kindness, I think, goes almost without saying, except that one could write a couple of treatises about kindness well, and that's been done. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the Buddhist practice of metta, loving kindness. I bet a lot of you are, actually. It's a good practice getting in touch with loving kindness, both for ourselves and for others. And I don't know if you knew this, but one version of metta can be found in our UU hymnal, and it goes something like this. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. that as a morning practice, and it really got me through the 2016 elections. And I'm serious, it really did. I was in a good space, even horrible as it was. And I do that now also, and I find it similarly helpful. I mentioned that kindness is necessarily linked to a humility that understands that we're neither greater nor lesser than any other person or being, actually. And what I want to do now is I want to take a little side trip on the word humility by pointing out one mark of how Unitarian Universalism has evolved as a faith community. In that the word humility is now explicitly included in our theology. That's really interesting. Sally even used it this morning. She opened by saying, we humbly, or she humbly, and I thought, whoa, I'm so tuned into that word this morning. Thank you for that. So I want to do a little reflection with you here, if and as you're comfortable. Is that okay? Participation is totally voluntary, but it is an interactive kind of thing, okay? I'd like you to listen and reflect on two different versions of a particular UU theological value, the original, which was adopted in 1985, and the current, which was adopted last year. Most UUs know this as our seventh principle. We used to have 7 principles. We almost added an 8th, but then instead we just threw the whole thing out and started all over again and made a drawing with some words attached. The drawing's over there on the wall, and I will give you the text of one of those petals on the flowers, we call it. Same thinking, but it's evolved a bit. So, okay, what I'd like you to do is to listen to these words, and then we'll have a moment of silence so that you can feel how they move within you, okay? We covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. Where do you feel this in your body? What happens to you as you listen to those words? We covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. Okay? Got that? Here's the second version. Do the same thing. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. Try it again. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. So this is an experiment. Did you feel a difference or have a different response to these two versions? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Anyone want to volunteer to put words to that? Just say it loudly and I'll repeat it with a mic.
I felt the first one in my head and my arms, and the second one more in my heart.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, first one in head and arms, second one in the heart. Anything
Yes.
more?
Agreed.
I felt the first one was a blessing going out, and the second one was the energy coming back to me.
Oh, blessing going out and the energy coming back.
The second one.
Very, very nice. Yeah.
I felt a kind of a butterfly sensation between the heart and throat chakra on the first one, and then the other one I felt more all over. It was more calming. The other one felt, like a tight stomach, but only up here.
Okay, so a flutter between the
Yeah.
throat and the heart chakra on the first one, but the second one, a fuller embodiment. Yes?
The respect that was in here in the covenant of the first one felt warrior. It felt, lower chakra in a way of bringing respect to where it hasn't been possibly or something, warrior. And the second one felt more like the heart blessing. It's a little more passive possibly
Yeah.
and receiving, but less warrior energy for sure. And personally, I respect both.
Mhm.
I'm not really talking about war, but I'm talking about boundaries.
Yeah, so
That's
did
respect.
everybody hear that? That is really interesting. The first one, more lower chakra energy like a warrior. And the second one, more of the heart. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And not that either is bad or wrong. They're just different. Yeah? Yeah, Rick?
And probably because my dog passed away, I'm thinking a lot about my dog, but
Yeah.
I had her come to me, on the first one, and just kind of lay her head on there. And then the second one, she started wagging her tail.
Oh, Rick's dog, which recently passed, came to him, and in the first version, the dog came up to him, put its head on lap. In the second version, they wagged their tail. So,
Nice.
So, just for, simply, the first one, it was about doing, I thought, the third eye chakra, I was thinking doing, radiating out, and the second one was being it.
okay, doing it versus being it. Yeah. Yeah, for me, I think there's a reason why, even though all 7 principles are very short statements, it was challenging to remember all 7 of them. Even as a seminarian, as a minister, I mean, I had to work to remember them because the words, they just wouldn't stick somehow. And these words don't exactly stick either, but boy, the feeling sticks. The feeling sticks for me. That's how the 2 are different for me. Great, thank you for doing this experiment with me. This is fascinating. Okay, so that was a little sidebar on the evolution of, the recent evolution of Unitarian Universalism and the sort of direction that we're going in, okay? And it does really, I can't imagine the word humility being used in the 1980s. I mean, it would be a stretch to use the word generosity, and, sorry, not generosity, gratitude. It just wasn't part of the culture. And now it is. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so when we talk about compassion for others, I'm going to start by saying a lot of people have made a distinction between empathy and compassion. Empathy is essentially about feelings, feeling with. I feel you. This is the way Rabbi Esther Adler has put it. There's a hierarchy of responses when we encounter suffering. Pity says, I see your pain. Sympathy says, I understand your pain. Empathy says, I feel your pain. Compassion says, I am with you in your pain and I will help. So the action in self-compassion is disciplining the ego. But for others, the action is to help alleviate suffering. Those are very, very complementary things, but to be a compassionate actor, or to be performing compassionate actions, as Brene Brown says, compassion isn't a virtue. It's not something you have or don't have. It's a commitment. It's something that we choose to practice. Compassion is something we choose to practice. Susan Sontag, the famous war photographer and public intellectual, didn't get quite that far. She noted that compassion is an unstable emotion. She said it needs to be translated into action or it withers. So that if you don't make that commitment, it goes away. You have to actively practice compassion. And in order to illustrate that, I want to turn once again to the difference between the original 7 principles adopted in 1985 and the version of the same values adopted in 2024. Note that I'm not saying that what we did in 1985 was bad or wrong. I'm just saying we've evolved since then. In 1985, there were a series of 7 statements, all of which were prefaced by the words, "We covenant to affirm and promote." So again, now referring to the 7th principle, which we just heard, we covenant to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. That's it. That's the whole statement. But what does that mean, to affirm and promote? The new statement doesn't end with the piece that we considered before. The new statement reads in full, "We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, of mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships." So all of these are pledges of action, and that's largely what we realized as a faith movement we were lacking. We didn't have any commitments to do anything about it. We had these thoughts, but then what? So each of those petals has action statements attached to it. Well, finally we get to the last piece, boundaries. And I have to say that as I was scribbling this down, I realized to my horror that it was time for me to leave and come here. And I forgot to pick up a very important book that I was gonna read something to you from Ernest Holmes. Oh well, I forgot the book. Darn it! I'm so sorry. I'll struggle with that in a minute. But I want to tell you a little bit about boundaries. And I'm just going to use Brene Brown's quote again, because I think all of us who engage in compassionate action with communities or with other people, we all realize that burnout is a real risk. And really, the only solution to that is good boundaries. So in order to be effective, we need to have our boundaries in place. We need to know a bit about boundaries. Brene Brown puts it this way. She takes it a step further. We can't connect with someone until we're clear about where we end and they begin. Hello. If there's no autonomy between people, there's no compassion, there's no empathy, there's just enmeshment. And you can't do a whole lot with enmeshment. That's a stuck place. So these are all lessons. There's a couple of pages in the selected writings of Ernest Holmes that I wanted to share with you, but I can't because I don't have the book. But he does point out that faith is not enough, that works are important. Those of you who have a religious background may understand that language from the various political movements within the Christian church. Faith with works, faith without works. You know, is faith without works, what does that mean? Are you required to have works if you have faith? And he has a whole different way of saying that and contextualizing that. But I'm sorry I can't share it with you today. But it's something to consider that even some of the most eloquent voices in today's worlds of the importance of spiritual alignment and spiritual growth and integrity, all of which I would say Unitarian Universalists have been learning a lot about lately, and that's a good thing. We used to be very head-oriented. We would go and do things and they would come from our heads without actually necessarily being grounded in spirit, which is a very complementary activity that's really worth our time and attention. It's one of the reasons that I love this fellowship so much, is because you do both. You do both. You put a lot of attention into spiritual development, and you put a lot of attention into compassionate action, both within your community and in the larger Florence community, and I love you for that. Here endeth my thoughts on self-compassion and compassion. Thank you. Thank you for being you. And Maya, I just have to thank you. Where are you? You're there? Yeah. Flowers. Oh my. Thank you.
Are we gonna sing?
I think we are.
I think we're gonna sing.
We're gonna